13 Hollywood legends, bound by brilliance and undone by smoke. Behind the glamour, the laughter, and the fame, cigarettes quietly wrote their final act. Tonight, we uncover the haunting truth of those who burned brightest and paid the price for it. Stay until the end. Their stories will stay with you. Number 1. Patrick Swayze. In the month of March in the year 2008, doctors confirmed that Patrick Swayze had advanced pancreatic cancer. The news broke the hearts of millions who had watched him move across the screen with unmatched energy and grace. For months he continued to film, his body frail but his spirit unbroken. He refused pity, refused retreat, and carried himself with the same quiet dignity that had defined his greatest roles. Every time he appeared in public, he looked thinner, but the spark in his eyes never faded. He had spent his early years mastering dance under the guidance of his mother, who ran a ballet school in Houston. That discipline, that physical control, became the foundation of his acting career. From Dirty Dancing to Ghost, Patrick embodied motion and emotion in perfect harmony. Yet behind that controlled strength was a lifelong addiction that haunted him: cigarettes. He smoked heavily, sometimes even between takes. It was a habit that had followed him from his teenage years into superstardom, and one that he later admitted might have fueled his illness. He said he was angry at himself for it, but could not quite let go. As his treatment began, Patrick and his wife Lisa retreated to their ranch in New Mexico. There, surrounded by the vast desert skies, he tried to find peace. He tended to his horses, spent quiet mornings watching the sunrise, and reminded himself that life, even in pain, was still beautiful. Despite the chemotherapy, he continued working on his television series The Beast, determined to complete it. Those on set spoke of his grit, of how he smiled through pain, never complained, and refused to accept weakness. In September of the year 2009, Patrick Swayze passed away at the age of 57. The world mourned the loss of a man who had danced through both joy and suffering with grace. Fans gathered outside theaters, leaving flowers and candles beneath movie posters. His name became a symbol of courage in the face of mortality, of love that endures even after death. His final message was one of hope: live fully, love deeply, and never stop fighting. Which of Patrick Swayze's performances touched you the most? Share your thoughts below, and let his story remind us all how fleeting and how beautiful life can be. Number 2. Diana Rigg. In the month of September, in the year 2020, Diana Rigg died at her home in London after a short battle with lung cancer. She was 82 years old. Her daughter, actress Rachel Sterling, later revealed that Diana had faced her illness privately, choosing to live her final months surrounded by family, laughter, and the same quiet dignity that had marked her long career. News of her passing traveled swiftly across the world, and tributes poured in from every corner of stage and screen. Diana Rigg had been a constant presence in British culture for more than 6 decades. She first became a household name in the 1960s for her role as Emma Peel in The Avengers, a character who redefined how women were seen on television. Intelligent, elegant, and capable, she gave audiences a heroine who could fight, think, and charm on equal terms with any man. Later, she earned international recognition again as the tragic Bond girl in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and decades later as Olenna Tyrell in Game of Thrones, where her sharp wit delighted a new generation of fans. Away from the spotlight, she was known for her independence and her love of the theater. She was a devoted performer on the London stage, appearing in Shakespeare, Chekhov, and countless modern productions. Those who worked with her often spoke of her fierce intelligence, her command of language, and her refusal to settle for mediocrity. Yet beneath that brilliance lay a simple human truth. Diana had been a smoker for most of her life. She often joked about it in interviews, admitting that the habit had followed her through years of rehearsals and long nights backstage. It was a companion she never quite abandoned. As her health declined, she continued to work and to read scripts, finding comfort in the rhythm of her craft. When she passed, colleagues described her as fearless to the end. The National Theatre dimmed its lights in her honor, and social media filled with messages from those who had grown up watching her. Her passing marked the end of a golden era of British acting, one built on grace, intellect, and iron determination. Even in death, Diana Rigg remained what she had always been: strong, complex, and unforgettable. Number 3. Telly Savalas. In the month of January in the year 1994, Telly Savalas died at the Sheraton Universal Hotel in Los Angeles after a long battle with bladder and prostate cancer. He was 72 years old. The illness had taken its toll over several years, but he continued to appear in public, his bald head and deep voice instantly recognizable. To many, his death felt like the end of an era in American television, when charm, wit, and toughness were carried in the same breath. Telly Savalas was born in New York City to Greek immigrant parents and grew up during the Great Depression. He began his career in radio and television, first as a talk show host, then as an actor known for his intensity and presence. In the 1960s, he earned an Academy Award nomination for his performance in Birdman of Alcatraz. But it was the 1970s that made him a household name. As Lieutenant Theo Kojak in the hit television series Kojak, he became an icon of American pop culture. The lollipop he carried in nearly every scene became a signature, replacing the cigarettes that had once filled his hands. Before the lollipop, though, cigarettes had been his constant companion. Telly was known as a heavy smoker throughout his early career. During long shoots, he would move from one cigarette to the next without pause. When doctors diagnosed him with cancer, they made clear that years of tobacco use had left their mark. Even as he fought the disease, he rarely spoke about it in public, preferring to maintain his image of confidence and control. In his final years, he lived quietly with his family in California, often visiting Las Vegas, where he was adored by fans and entertainers alike. He was a devoted father who spent much of his time with his children and grandchildren. When he passed away, tributes came from actors, directors, and musicians who had admired his generosity and professionalism. He was buried in Los Angeles with the simple words on his tombstone, "The Lollipop Man." For millions who grew up watching him, Telly Savalas was more than a television detective. He was the voice of a generation that believed in cool defiance and effortless charm. His death reminded many of the fragility that even the strongest faces must eventually show. Number 4. Alan King. In the month of May in the year 2004, Alan King died at his home in Manhattan after a long fight with lung cancer. He was 76 years old. The news struck deeply in the world of comedy, where his sharp tongue and quick wit had made him a beloved figure for more than half a century. His passing closed the curtain on one of the most distinctive voices in American humor, a man who had chronicled the absurdities of modern life with both laughter and truth. Alan King began his career as a teenage performer in the smoky nightclubs of New York. He worked tirelessly, often performing 2 or 3 shows a night just to make ends meet. His humor came from observation, from the frustrations of everyday life, and from his own experience as a husband and father trying to keep up with a changing world. As television grew in the 1950s and 60s, King became a regular guest on shows hosted by Johnny Carson and Ed Sullivan. His timing, his delivery, and his everyman charm made him one of the most respected comedians of his generation. Behind that polished stage presence, there was another constant companion: his cigars. Alan King was rarely seen without one. Whether in interviews, backstage, or at dinner parties, a cigar was part of his identity. He often joked that he had spent more time with cigars than with most people he knew. But the humor could not hide the cost. Decades of smoking took their toll, and when he was diagnosed with lung cancer, he faced it with the same candor that marked his comedy. He continued to perform and even wrote essays about aging, illness, and the strange comedy of facing mortality. Until his final months, Alan remained active in charity work, especially for hospitals and Jewish community causes. He never lost his sense of humor, telling friends that laughter was the only medicine that truly worked. When he died, tributes poured in from comedians, actors, and audiences who had grown up with his work. His funeral drew an extraordinary crowd, all united in respect and affection for the man who had taught them to laugh at life's hardest truths. What is your favorite memory of Alan King's comedy or one of his performances that still makes you smile today? Share your thoughts below and let his humor live on through your memories. Number 5. Gary Cooper. In the month of May, in the year 1961, Gary Cooper died at his home in Los Angeles after a long and painful battle with cancer. He was 60 years old. The announcement was met with quiet sorrow across the nation. To many, he had been the symbol of American virtue, the calm and steady hero who never raised his voice and never lost his integrity. His passing marked the end of an era, a final bow for the man who had come to embody the values of courage and grace that once defined Hollywood's golden age. Gary Cooper was born in Montana and raised with the open skies and rugged mountains as his backdrop. Those landscapes shaped the simplicity and steadiness that became his trademark on screen. He entered films in the 1920s, and by the following decade had become one of the most bankable stars in the world. In High Noon, Sergeant York, and countless westerns, he played men who did what was right even when it was hard. His quiet strength became the American ideal. Away from the cameras, Cooper was known for his modesty and his gentle nature. But like most actors of his generation, he was also a heavy smoker. Cigarettes were everywhere on set between takes, during interviews, even in promotional photos. In those days, smoking was seen as sophistication, not danger. He often lit one after another while waiting for the cameras to roll. As the years passed, the habit became a part of his image, as natural to him as the cowboy hat he so often wore. When doctors diagnosed him with cancer, they told him that the disease had spread beyond cure. He accepted the news with the same stoic calm that had defined his performances. Friends said he rarely complained, speaking instead about gratitude for a full life. He spent his final months surrounded by his family, receiving visits from old friends like Ernest Hemingway. On the day of his funeral, flags across Hollywood studios were lowered in his honor. To those who loved his films, Gary Cooper's death was not just the loss of a man, but the fading of a symbol. He represented a time when heroes were quiet, honorable, and deeply human. His shadow still lingers wherever the western sunset falls. Number 6. Gloria Graham. In the month of October in the year 1981, Gloria Graham died in New York City from stomach cancer. She was 57 years old. Her final days were quiet and private, spent in the small apartment of a friend after she left the hospital against medical advice. Her death brought a somber close to a life that had once burned with intensity, glamour, and heartbreak. For those who remembered her luminous face and trembling voice, it felt as though a part of Hollywood's golden light had gone out. Gloria Graham had been one of the most captivating actresses of the post-war era. She won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress for her role in The Bad and the Beautiful in 1952 and became a symbol of the complex women who haunted film noir, beautiful, wounded, and dangerously alive. In films like It's a Wonderful Life, In a Lonely Place, and The Big Heat, she gave audiences a blend of fragility and fire that few could match. She was known for her striking looks, her husky voice, and her ability to make even a single glance feel electric. Behind the camera, her life was far less glamorous. She struggled with insecurities, difficult relationships, and the pressures of a studio system that demanded perfection. Cigarettes became a constant companion through long nights on set and days of endless publicity. Smoking was part of the culture, and like many stars of her generation, she embraced it without knowing its cost. By the time she was diagnosed with cancer, her health had already been fragile from years of exhaustion and stress. Still, she tried to hide her illness, continuing to act in small productions in England until she could no longer stand. When her condition worsened, she returned to the United States hoping to recover enough to keep working. Instead, she spent her final hours in a quiet apartment far from the spotlight that had once adored her. The news of her death reached Hollywood slowly, but once it did, tributes came from colleagues who remembered her brilliance and her kindness. Gloria Graham's story remains one of talent shadowed by tragedy. She was a woman who gave everything to her art, even as the glamour that surrounded her concealed a life of pain and longing. Number 7. Dean Jones. In the month of September in the year 2015, Dean Jones died in Los Angeles at the age of 84 after complications related to Parkinson's disease. His passing closed the final chapter of a man whose face had been synonymous with family entertainment for generations. The news struck a tender chord among audiences who had grown up watching him in Disney films, where he was often cast as the optimistic everyman who found humor and hope in the smallest moments of life. Dean Jones had begun his career on stage and quickly moved to film during the 1950s. He became one of Disney's most beloved stars through movies like The Love Bug, That Darn Cat, and The Shaggy DA. His charm and warmth made him a fixture in American households. Even as his characters stumbled through comedic chaos, his sincerity never wavered. Off-screen, he was known for the same kindness that audiences saw on film. He treated crew members, fans, and co-stars with respect, earning admiration throughout Hollywood. Like many performers of his time, Dean worked in an era when smoking was part of everyday life. Movie sets, press interviews, and even rehearsals were filled with cigarette smoke. Though not known for heavy smoking himself, he lived within a culture that normalized the habit. The air of the studios, the lounges, and the waiting rooms was thick with tobacco, a silent presence that accompanied nearly every actor of his generation. In later years, he reflected on how much that environment shaped the health of countless entertainers, himself included. When he began showing symptoms of Parkinson's disease, Dean continued to face the world with the same grace and humor that had guided his career. He spent his final years surrounded by his wife and children, often speaking about faith and gratitude. Those who visited him remembered a man still full of light, his eyes carrying the same warmth that once filled movie screens. His funeral was a quiet gathering of family, friends, and longtime colleagues. To them, Dean Jones represented an age of innocence in Hollywood, when laughter and kindness still seemed stronger than cynicism. His smile, preserved in film, remains an echo of joy that refuses to fade. Which of Dean Jones's films do you remember most fondly from your childhood? Share your memories below and keep his gentle spirit alive through your words. Number 8. Robert Alda. In the month of May in the year 1986, Robert Alda died in Los Angeles after suffering a stroke that followed a long period of illness. He was 72 years old. His passing marked the end of a life deeply woven into the fabric of American theater and early television. Known for his charm, musicality, and smooth confidence, Robert had spent more than 5 decades moving between stage, film, and the growing world of television entertainment. Born Alfonso Giuseppe Giovanni Roberto d'Abruzzo in New York City, he began his career in the nightclubs of the 1930s, where he sang and told jokes to small, smoky audiences. His natural talent and charisma soon led him to Broadway. In 1946, he starred as George Gershwin in the musical biopic Rhapsody in Blue, a role that earned him widespread recognition. His smooth baritone voice and elegant manner made him a natural leading man, equally at ease in comedies, dramas, and musicals. Over time, he became known not only for his performances but also as the father of actor Alan Alda, who inherited his father's passion for the craft. Throughout his career, Robert Alda worked in an industry where cigarettes were as common as scripts. Rehearsal halls, dressing rooms, and recording studios were filled with the haze of tobacco smoke. He himself was a regular smoker for much of his life. It was part of the rhythm of work, one hand holding a script, the other a cigarette. Friends would later recall that he rarely appeared without one. The habit lingered even as his health began to falter in later years. By the early 1980s, Robert's strength had started to decline, yet he continued to perform in guest roles and stage appearances whenever possible. He found joy in music, conversation, and the company of his family. When his health finally failed, those who knew him spoke of a man who had given everything to his art and asked for little in return. His funeral drew old friends from Broadway and Hollywood alike, many of whom remembered him not only for his voice but for the kindness and humor that filled every room he entered. Robert Alda's life was a reminder of an era when talent was measured not by fame but by endurance, and where the lights of the stage burned brightest through the smoke. Number 9. Red Fox. In the month of October in the year 1991, Red Fox collapsed on the set of his new television series in Los Angeles and was pronounced dead shortly after arriving at the hospital. He was 68 years old. The cause was a massive heart attack that struck without warning while cameras and crew stood frozen in disbelief. For those who had followed his long and unpredictable career, the news was both shocking and painfully ironic. The man who had made millions laugh through Sanford and Son had fallen during a moment of work and performance, as though the stage itself had been his final home. Red Fox had spent decades carving his place in entertainment history. Born John Elroy Sanford in St. Louis, he rose from small comedy clubs to become one of the most influential stand-up comedians of his time. His humor was raw, direct, and often controversial, but it was rooted in truth. Long before his television fame, he was a star of the nightclub circuit, where cigarette smoke and laughter mingled in every corner. For years, he performed in rooms so thick with haze that audiences could barely see the stage lights. It was the world that built him, and the world that never truly left his lungs. On the set of Sanford and Son, his gravelly voice and sharp timing became legendary. That voice, so full of grit and rhythm, had been shaped by years of smoking and long nights. Friends often joked that he carried a cigarette as naturally as a microphone. By the time he returned to television in the early 1990s, his health was fragile, though he rarely admitted it. He had always been a fighter, a man who pushed through pain with humor and pride. When the heart attack struck, the cast and crew thought at first that he was joking. The irony of that moment still haunts those who witnessed it, but the laughter turned to silence as reality sank in. His death marked the end of an era in American comedy. In the days that followed, tributes came from every part of the entertainment world. Comedians, musicians, and fans remembered a pioneer who broke barriers and gave voice to truth through laughter. Red Fox's passing was a reminder that even the brightest light on stage can fade in an instant, leaving behind echoes of laughter and smoke. Number 10. Tony Gwynn. In the month of June in the year 2014, Tony Gwynn died in Poway, California after a long battle with salivary gland cancer. He was 54 years old. The news sent a wave of grief across the world of baseball. Fans and players alike mourned a man whose discipline, humility, and extraordinary skill had defined 2 decades of the sport. His death also reopened a difficult conversation about the dangers of tobacco, a substance he had long used in its smokeless form. Tony Gwynn was born in Los Angeles and grew up loving the rhythm and strategy of baseball. He attended San Diego State University, where his talent quickly set him apart. In 1982, he began his major league career with the San Diego Padres and stayed with the team for 20 years. Known for his precise hitting and unmatched work ethic, he earned 8 batting titles and became one of the most consistent players in the game's history. His teammates called him Mr. Padre, a symbol of loyalty and dedication. Throughout his career, Tony was rarely seen without a small pouch of chewing tobacco. Like many players of his generation, he viewed it as part of the game. He chewed during practice, in the dugout, and even during interviews. The habit followed him from college into the major leagues, a quiet ritual that gave him focus but carried a hidden cost. In 2010, doctors diagnosed him with cancer, and he immediately pointed to years of chewing tobacco as the likely cause. He spoke openly about his regret, urging younger athletes to avoid the same path. During his final years, Tony continued to coach at San Diego State, guiding a new generation of players with patience and wisdom. Despite surgeries and treatments, he remained positive, smiling through every challenge. He told reporters that faith, family, and baseball gave him strength. When he died, tributes filled stadiums across the country. His number 19 jersey hung in dugouts, and players wrote his initials on their hats as they took the field. Tony Gwynn's legacy lives beyond his records. He was proof that greatness and humility can coexist, and his death served as a stark reminder of how even quiet habits can leave lasting consequences. Which Tony Gwynn moment do you remember most from his career? Share your thoughts below and celebrate the life of a true sportsman. Number 11. Anne Bancroft. In the month of June in the year 2005, Anne Bancroft died in New York City after a battle with uterine cancer. She was 73 years old. The announcement came from her husband, actor and filmmaker Mel Brooks, who described her as the love of his life and the light of every room she entered. Her death brought to a close one of the most remarkable careers in American acting, a career that had spanned theater, film, and television with equal brilliance. Anne Bancroft's journey began in the boroughs of New York, where she studied acting under the guidance of some of the most respected teachers of her time. Her determination and intensity quickly earned her roles on Broadway, where she won acclaim for her performance in Two for the Seesaw. In 1962, she starred in The Miracle Worker, a role that won her the Academy Award for Best Actress. Her portrayal of Anne Sullivan, the devoted teacher of Helen Keller, remains one of the defining performances in film history. In the decades that followed, Anne continued to choose roles that challenged both her and her audiences. She became a symbol of intelligence and sensuality with her performance as Mrs. Robinson in The Graduate, a film that captured the cultural turbulence of the 1960s. Behind the sophistication of her characters was an actress of deep sensitivity and discipline. Her colleagues often described her as fearless, never afraid to explore the darker or quieter sides of humanity. Like many of her generation, she worked through an era when smoking was woven into daily life on and off the screen. Sets, dressing rooms, and rehearsals were filled with the haze of tobacco. Cigarettes were props, fashion statements, and companions during long filming days. Anne smoked for many years before eventually giving up the habit, though the damage had already taken its course. When illness came, she faced it privately, continuing to work and to write until her strength faded. Her passing left a profound emptiness in both the theater and film communities. Directors, actors, and critics remembered her as a woman of intelligence, power, and rare honesty. Her performances remain timeless, carrying within them the quiet dignity of an artist who never compromised her craft or her truth. Number 12. Peg Entwistle. In the month of September in the year 1932, Peg Entwistle's body was discovered beneath the Hollywoodland sign in Los Angeles. She was 24 years old. The discovery shocked the city and cast a dark shadow over the dreams of thousands who had come to California seeking fame. Her death became one of the most haunting stories in the history of Hollywood, a symbol of ambition consumed by despair. Peg Entwistle was born in Wales and raised in New York, where she began acting on stage at a young age. She quickly gained attention for her talent and poise, performing in respected Broadway productions during the late 1920s. Critics praised her ability to express deep emotion with subtle gestures, and many believed she was destined for stardom. In 1932, she moved to Los Angeles, joining the wave of stage actors who hoped to find success in motion pictures. She was cast in a small role in the film 13 Women, but the movie received little attention, and her contract was not renewed. The early 1930s were years of hardship for many actors. The Great Depression had reduced opportunities, and the transition from silent films to sound left many performers behind. Peg struggled to find work and grew increasingly isolated. She rented a small apartment near the Hollywood Hills, where the giant white letters of the Hollywoodland sign stood as both inspiration and cruel reminder. On a night in September, she climbed the hill alone, leaving behind a note that spoke of disappointment and hopelessness before leaping to her death. At the time, the tragedy was covered by newspapers across the country. Reporters described the young actress as beautiful and full of promise, a woman whose dreams had been crushed by the unforgiving nature of show business. In the years that followed, her story became part of Hollywood legend. Some claimed to see her ghost wandering near the sign, still dressed in the clothes she wore that night. Though Peg Entwistle's life was brief, her story endured as a cautionary tale about the fragile line between hope and despair in a city built on dreams. The smoke-filled studios, the pressure of fame, and the silence that followed her final step became a mirror of Hollywood's hidden sadness. Number 13. Cornel Wilde. In the month of October in the year 1989, Cornel Wilde died in Los Angeles after a long struggle with leukemia. He was 77 years old. His passing marked the quiet end of a life spent both before and behind the camera, a career that reflected the changing tides of Hollywood itself. Known for his athletic grace, sharp intelligence, and adventurous spirit, he had lived as both a matinee idol and a daring filmmaker who followed his own path long after the studio system faded. Cornel Wilde was born in Hungary and moved to New York as a child. He showed remarkable talent early in life, excelling in languages, academics, and fencing, a skill that would later serve him well in his film career. In the 1940s, he rose to prominence in Hollywood, starring in A Song to Remember, a role that earned him an Academy Award nomination. His striking looks and physical agility made him a natural choice for swashbuckling epics, historical dramas, and romantic adventures. He became one of the most recognized leading men of his generation, known for intensity and charm. As the decades passed, Cornel grew restless with the limitations of the traditional studio model. In the 1950s and 60s, he turned to directing and producing his own films, including The Naked Prey, a bold and unconventional survival story that earned critical acclaim. Behind the scenes, however, he was often surrounded by the same habits that defined the entertainment world of his time: cigarette smoke-filled sets, dressing rooms, and offices. Cornel, like many of his peers, was a smoker for much of his life. He viewed it as a companion through long nights of writing and editing. By the time he slowed his pace, years of exposure had already taken their toll. When his health began to decline, he retreated from the public eye, spending time with his family and close friends. He remained intellectually curious, still reading scripts and discussing art and history. His death was met with quiet tributes from those who admired his independence and artistry. Cornel Wilde's legacy endures as a portrait of talent shaped by courage and creativity. He lived with passion, worked with conviction, and left behind films that continue to inspire those who value beauty and integrity in art. If you enjoyed this story, remember to subscribe for more timeless Hollywood tales. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.